Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Clinical and Translational Science Collaborative of Cleveland, we thank you for joining us. Before we begin, we'd like to share a bit about the CTSC. The Clinical and Translational Science Collaborative of Cleveland is a collaborative among Case Western Reserve University and its affiliated hospital systems, the Cleveland Clinic, Metro Health, University Hospitals, and the Louis Stokes Veterans Administration Medical Center. We aspire to be a catalyst for high-quality clinical and translational research, both locally and nationally, by changing the culture and environment of biomedical research, sharing resources and expertise, and streamlining the research process to move translational research from bench to bedside and to the community. Every Thursday in February, we're investing 1 hour to learn about a current Black history maker. Today, we celebrate and meet Michelle Browder. Michelle is a native of Denver, Colorado. At the age of 7, Michelle and her family moved to rural Verbena, Alabama in the late 70s. Michelle experienced bullying through racial bias at an early age. Outspoken as a child, Michelle began combating her attackers through physical confrontations, leading to multiple suspensions. During her last suspension, Michelle's father gave her an ultimatum: prison or art. He challenged her to seize the moment to be creative. At the age of 13, Michelle harnessed her entrepreneurial spirit and started a hand-painted t-shirt business. After graduation, she moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and attended the Art Institute of Atlanta, studying graphic design and visual communications. For nearly 35 years, Michelle has used art, history, and real talk conversations to mentor marginalized and disfavored students through visual arts and spoken word. She has created and branded art diversion programs used by juvenile detention centers in Atlanta, Georgia, and Montgomery, Alabama. Michelle's art has been shown in galleries across the country, notably the Rosa Parks Museum in Montgomery, Alabama. She has painted for Tyler Perry, Denzel Washington, and countless other stars. She opened a gallery and restaurant called PJR'S Fish and Barbecue Restaurant that employed high school students, returning citizens, and the homeless. Michelle has traveled across the country speaking and motivating our children to be more than a statistic, generalization, or stereotype. She challenges all children and students to defy the odds of victimization. Today, Michelle is the founder and director of I Am More Than, Youth Empowerment Initiative in Montgomery, Alabama. She owns and operates More Than Tours, a social business providing educational tours for nearly 10,000 underserved students in marginalized communities of color. Michelle's mission is simple: exposing our children to the truth will give them the access to a seat at the table. Michelle, the floor is yours to share about your work. And then we'll kick off the Q&A portion of your celebration.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So basically, yeah, so I am also the creator of the Mothers of Gynecology Monument, the memorial that's here in Montgomery, Alabama. We established it in last year, actually in September of 2021. I actually got the idea to honor the Mothers of Gynecology, Anarcha, Lucy, and Betsy, 3 of the 11 girls that were used as experiments in the Alabama fistula studies. When I was just a kid myself, I was 18 years old, went to college at the Art Institute of Atlanta, and basically, can you hear me now? Are y'all not hearing me?
I can hear you.
I can hear
Okay.
you.
I'm sorry, the screen said to unmute. And so basically, attended the Art Institute of Atlanta, and one of my professors had this postcard on his desk that depicted Anarcha, Lucy, Betsy. What we know today is Anarcha, Lucy, and Betsy. It was a Robert Tom piece. He was an illustrator that was commissioned by Park Davis, which is now Pfizer, to create I think it was like 45 moments in medicine, great moments in medicine. And when it came to J. Marion Sims, this was a white illustrator's thought on what enslavement was, what it looked like. And then, of course, what J. Marion Sims and his colleagues, it just gave a false narrative through visual art as to what happened to these girls. And so I asked my professor at the time, what is this postcard? See, I grew up in Verbena, Alabama. And in Verbena, Alabama, in our textbooks, we didn't talk about slavery. We didn't talk about human trafficking. We didn't talk about Henrietta Lacks. We talked about syphilis studies, but it was just a skim off the surface. It never talked about the extent of what happened to these Black people in the 40s. And so when I asked him, I was very curious about this postcard, and many of you have probably seen it. It's Anarcha on her knees on a table, a white doctor holding a speculum in his hand, and then two other white doctors surrounding this one Black girl on the table, and these two Black girls peering behind a sheet, looking very afraid. And so I asked him, I said, what does this mean? And real snarky, he's like, figure it out yourself. And he wasn't very kind in his wording, and kind of triggered me because, when folks start speaking off the cuff, I don't like it. And so I thought, okay, so I'm going to figure it out. And so I went to this place called the Shrine of the Black Madonna, which is in Atlanta, Georgia. And basically they teach the African diaspora. They talk about enslavement. They talk about the human trafficking. They teach you the real history and the capitalism behind enslaving Black folks in this country. And so I remember going back to my professor, and I said, I found out what this postcard really means. I found out the meaning and the degradation of what happened to these Black girls. And so I said, I'm going to create my portfolio to honor them. And so I created this beautiful campaign to honor the mothers of gynecology in my Black eye as a female, what I saw them at the time at the age of 18, mind you. And my portfolio included 15 pieces of art. It was a whole campaign for the African American music festival. But I used these women, and he said, Michelle, your portfolio is too Black. You need to stay a little longer. So in essence, he did not pass my portfolio, and I would have to stay an additional 6 months to get up. That meant more money. So I said, we're not doing that. And I declined, and I decided to drop out of college. Don't judge me. I dropped out of college and decided to pursue a career in graphic and visual designs. Did very well until I received a phone call in 1998. I'm dating myself now. From my parents, who have a place here in Montgomery, Alabama, that helps the marginalized and working poor and children that are just in need of dire services. And got that call in 98, and I did not answer the call in terms of moving to Montgomery, Alabama until 2002. And lo and behold, when I moved to Montgomery, Alabama, there is a statue of that same man, J. Marion Sims, at the state's capitol. Now, Sims has been, credited as being the father of gynecology. And so I wanted to know more about the city that I was going to call home. And so I started researching all this iconography in our city. We have this is the birthplace of the civil rights movement, but it's the cradle of the Confederacy. And so I started just researching, the narrative and the art and again, the iconography. And so to have Sims at our state's capitol, standing in front of a building that was built by enslaved African men, women, and children that was trafficked to this city. And at the time, it being a city where it was one of the top slave trading hubs in the Union, Montgomery, Alabama, was very wealthy because of these Black lives that mattered. And so I thought, wow, this is 2002. This guy is standing in the front of the Capitol. Do people know what he did? Are they aware? And so I said, you know what? I was triggered again to create some form of art to honor them. Mind you, that's 2002, 20 years ago. So we're 30, by September 21st of 2021, it had been in roughly 32 years that I wanted to use my art, as Nina Simone said, which is to change not only the narrative, but if we're going to be creatives, if you're an artist, you have to reflect the times in which you live. And so I thought, okay, during COVID, so y'all don't judge me, but I was out, I was petting my horses. I have 9 rescue horses. And during COVID, I can't give tours. I really wasn't feeling the art scene. And so I'm just out grooming one of my horses. And I swear to God, that horse spoke to me. I said, you know what? I don't know how America is going to thrive. I don't know what we're going to do as a country. And I was like, do you know? And I turned to my horse. I call him Red because he's red. And he was like, I don't know. And when that horse spoke to me, don't judge me. When that horse spoke to me, I said, it is time for me to do something because this horse is talking to me. And so I decided at that moment that Anarcha, Lucy, Betsy, those three girls, they never left me. And I decided at that moment that I would now then go and try to seek out a way to erect a monument, not just in a monument, so that a piece of beautiful art so that people can see and gawk at and look at and admire, but a piece of work that will speak to the times in which we live today, but also give the rest of the history. If he's the father, if J. Marion Sims is the father of gynecology, modern gynecology, then where are the mothers, right? So this is what that plaque in front of him says. And so here comes the trek, right? So I decided to do my research, and I'd already started the process. But right before COVID, I was visiting some friends. They're Japanese. My girlfriend is Japanese and her husband is Jewish. And I was in San Francisco in the Bay Area. And we went to breakfast. I was visiting them. And there was this beautiful, I turned the corner of Hayes Valley, and there was this beautiful metal statue of a Greek goddess, or a Buddhist goddess, I'm sorry, named Tara. And she stands like 15 feet tall with all types of beautiful metal. And I looked up at her and I said, this is what Anarcha needs to look like when people see this woman who is depicted on a what do you call it, on a table, helpless, in fear, grasping her chest. When people see her, she needs to be strong with her back straightened and with her eyes towards heaven. So I'm talking to my friends about this, and they're like, wow, tell us more about your vision to do this. And I did. Didn't think anything of it. 2 weeks later, my friends are at a Jewish Seder. My Japanese friend is more Jewish than her husband, whom she married, who's Jewish. And so they're at this Jewish Seder, and they called me during the Seder, and they're like, Michelle, we found a volunteer that worked on that statue that you like so much. Would you like for us to connect you with the original artist? And I'm like, no, I got it covered. I've already started the process of building this monument. And they said, well, let's just have a conversation. Passive aggressive. So I said, okay, great. So we had a conversation, and 1 year later, my friend, her name is Dana Albany. She's a Jewish woman out of California. She's a magnificent Burning Man artist. She said, Michelle, I'm sold, but it took me a year. She said, send me all of your designs, and I want you to come here for a month, and I'm going to teach you how to weld. So I was like, okay. So I was familiar with the Black Rosies, those women during World War I and II that helped create ships, and that was welding. And so I said, you know what, I'll go. And literally it took me a month and a half to learn how to create the statues. And I don't know if you have the PowerPoint that I sent, but if you want to log on to our website, you can go and see these beautiful 3 girls/mothers of gynecology. When I returned from San Francisco, I had a half a head, and then a full pair of legs, but then just skeletons and scattered pieces. And so I said, I could do this. I could do this. So I returned to Montgomery, Alabama. And because we work with, marginalized communities, I already had a warehouse in place, and decided to open up a welding shop, and continue the process of welding these mothers together. I had another team that came from Missouri that said, let us help you at least put the pieces together. It took a lot because these women are massive. Anarcha is 15 feet tall. Lucy is 9 feet. And I think Betsy is about 12 feet tall. So I needed some help, and they became my team. They stayed with me 2 weeks, and I cried like a baby when they left me, because that means it was all on me to complete the art of storytelling about the history of gynecology in this country, and the torture, and the notion that Black people had a higher tolerance for pain, or that we didn't experience pain differently. All of that came from the legacy of slavery. And so I felt that if I could create a piece of art that can continue, it would be a living monument to where we can talk about the atrocities that are happening today as it relates to how it trickled down from enslavement and capitalism, and just the marginalization of Black lives. I think that my life would be complete and my work would go on, in terms of using art to change narratives and to change mindsets. And there's an old passage that says that you will know the truth and the truth will make you free. And we need to be free in healthcare to tell the truth about the treatment, the inequality that we're suffering right now in healthcare today. So I call on the names of Serena Williams, who had a baby, you know, the infant mortality rate in the maternal health crisis that we're in right now, that it's safer to give birth in Cuba, right, than it is in the United States. We have a dis-ease, we have a problem today. And so with that, I said, I want my work to speak as a monument and to speak of those stories like the Ralph sisters. Have you heard of them? The Ralph sisters were two girls that were experimented on. And I'm not talking about in 1950 or 1920. I'm talking about 1973, where they were experimented on. They were sterilized. They were, quote, feeble-minded. They were not the smartest and the brightest of America. And so therefore, that whole eugenics ideology came into play in 1973, when they were just literally taking the reproductive rights away from Black and brown melanated people, simply because the mother could not read, and therefore she signed the X when she thought she was issuing contraceptives to her daughter. They were actually taking their organs, their female organs, so they could not reproduce. And we saw it we saw this same type of activity at the border here in Atlanta, Georgia, where they were sterilizing women of color, the Mexican women of color or immigrants, and taking their organs. This was in the 2020 and 21 and 22. So I get a little passionate. You got to forgive me, because again, I stand on the shoulders of Nina Simone, who says that it is my duty. It is my duty to reflect the times. And these are the times in which we're living. When you have a doctor like Susan Moore, who is attacked by this thing called COVID, and she is a doctor, and she tells her physicians that this is how you treat me, but they viewed her as a drug addict. It is my duty to talk about the marginalization and the dehumanization that we're experiencing in our healthcare system. I'll show the story. My 82-year-old mother was passing a kidney stone, not one, but three at one time. And her doctor said, well, your pain could not be on a scale of 1 to 10. It couldn't be that bad. She said it was a 10. He's like, oh, it couldn't be that bad. But yet he put her on morphine. And when I arrived at the hospital, this is during COVID, so, you know, you can only have one person at a time. And I said, Mom, what are they giving you? And she said, morphine. And I said, well, I'm not a doctor, but I don't think morphine should be what you should. I don't know. Y'all tell me. I was like, I don't know if this is right, because my mother had heart issues. And so when I approached the doctor about it, he says, well, you know, Ms. Browder, you're right, but let me show you my kidney stones. And it was nothing for me to pass my kidney stone. So surely she would be okay. But my mother's ripped the insides. She was being ripped to shreds at 82. And so when I bring that subject up, because we have to be free. And once we know the truth about our history, as you can see right now in our culture, they don't want us to know the truth about what transpired. They don't want us to know about, they'll give you the syphilis studies. You know, they'll tell you a little bit about that. And also that there was a cure. And also that it was a nurse, a Black nurse, that administered many of these shots to these people. They'll give you little bits and pieces of it, but it doesn't tell you where the root came from. So I will just say to you all that part of my duty is to call upon the root doctors, that we need root doctors in our healthcare professions today. And when I say that, I mean, you know, we need people that could get to the root of the dis-ease that's in our country right now, that is not equitable and fair as it relates to wellness and well-being, and how we teach those coming up and administering the practitioners. We need more root doctors, people who care with empathy, dignity, and respect. And that's hopefully what this monument that I've erected, which is a labor of love. When I went to seek out the funds, they told me, oh, you should go to the gatekeepers to get the funding, or go you seek the advice of this person. And I was like, no, I'm a doer, I'm an executor, I'm a root doctor. I'm gonna find a way to get to the root of having a conversation with people about where we are. So these 3 girls in Montgomery, Alabama were used as experimentations. And I want people to know their names. I want people to know that they were tortured. I want people to know that they were raped and that they were used as breeders. That America and the ideology of enslavement and trafficking, that these people went on to buy, sell, and trade folks even during the Civil War. I lived in the cradle of the Confederacy, where Jefferson Davis stood proudly in front of the house that Black people built to say that they were stamped from the beginning. And that it wasn't about that the Civil War wasn't about tariffs. It was about states' rights, but yet it was also about capitalism and the peculiar institution, which is enslavement. And so this doctor, J. Marion Sims, had this idea that he could cure this fistula, this hole that was from obstructive childbirth. He felt that he could cure it, even though he knew he could not. So Anarcha, being 17 years old with her first child, developed her fistula, and she then, I can't see what you're saying, she then went on to have 30 surgeries without the anesthesia. Lucy, on her 12th surgery, nearly died. And Betsy, we lose account of her, but she was pregnant multiple times. And all of them, the fistula, that the constant flow of urine and feces and the smell and the dehumanization that came along with it. The Sims position that he created, or that he called himself, finding a position to where he can actually go inside the cervix and the vaginal area and find this hole to suture with silk sutures. It was torture. When you go to Germany, you don't see Dr. Mengele. You don't see that. So, I've had to fight many of your physicians that say, oh, Michelle, he was a man of his time. He did so much great work. And at the same time, let's recognize the fact that during that time, I'm sorry, I can't see what you're saying at the bottom, but during that time, that this was not just a man of his time. So if he was a man of his time, that there was no humility, there was no dignity in life, because these girls screamed in pain without anesthesia. So I'm here today, not to preach, but just to share my work and the passion that I have for it. We have gone on to create a conference. It's called the Anarcha Lucy Betsy Day of Reckoning. I kind of coerced our mayor, told him I would vote for him again if he gave us a day to reckon with this history with Anarcha Lucy and Betsy. And so this is our second conference that we're having, and it will be February 26th through March 1st, where we'll talk about healthcare with Linda Villarosa, who wrote the book Under the Skin. We'll talk about creating pathways to truth and education and freedom with none other than Nicole Hannah-Jones. We're also going to talk about Dolan Perkins, who wrote Take My Hand, and it's all about the Relf sisters. We're honoring the Relf sisters. We actually bought them a house because with, creating pathways through this monument of healthcare and justice and reparations, we need to give back. We need to do something to repair the breach. And that's why we need the root doctors. And finally, I will share with you all the space, the backyard hospital where J. Marion Sims conducted these experiments on these helpless enslaved girls, sexually trafficked, abused. I said, I called up the office and I said, hey, I would like to bring about, 75 people to the space. We're having a conference. We're going to talk about healthcare. We're going to talk about maternal health. We're going to get to the root. We're going to become, root doctors. And this was last year. And so the owner said, well, the manager of the building said, go down to the building now. The owner is there, and see if he would allow you to have your conversation in the backyard. That's where I wanted to do it anyway, in the backyard of the hospital, or J. Marion Sims's office. In the backyard, he created a makeshift hospital where he experimented and kept these girls. And so I get to the building, and there's this tall white man with gray hair, kind of remind me of Mike Pence, had a deep Southern twang. And I walked up to him and I said, hey, I was like, I just want to know if I could have, I told him what I wanted. I would like to bring some guests to the backyard, just have a conversation about what happened here. And he was like, well, sure, you can do that. Do you need access to the building? And I said, no, I said, just the backyard. He was like, oh, okay. He said, I thought you were here to buy the building. And I was like, oh, no, I'm not here to buy the building. I said, but the building is for sale. And he was like, yeah. I was like, how much you selling it for? He was like, oh, I'm selling it for about $100,000. I was like, shut up, Mike. Call the mic, y'all. Don't judge me. I was thinking like that. And so he says, he's like, no, it's $100,000. He said, my name is Jim. And I said, well, good to meet you, Jim. He says, but we're just trying to get rid of Miss Browder. Let me tell you something was wrong with this building. I said, what is it, asbestos? He says, no. I said, is the roof caving in? He said, no. I said, well, what's going on with the building? He said, there's paranormal activity happening in the building. And I started laughing. It wasn't funny, but I started laughing. I was like, when you mean paranormal activity, what do you mean? And he says, well, we can hear people walking around in the building. He said, if you tell anybody, I'll deny it. He says, people are walking around in the building. We can see shadows. He says, I've never seen it, but my staff has seen it. He was like, Miss Browder, we've been out of this building for about 4 years, and I just want to sell it, but I just don't want it anymore. And so I said, you mean the floor is okay? Nothing's wrong with the floor? He was like, no, you go in there right now. So I peeked in the window, and all you can see are like desks and these open file cabinets. Like they just left everything, took everything and left. So I said, wow. I said, well, $100,000. And I said, well, I think I need this building. He says, well, what would you do with it? And I said, well, I would teach the rest of this history that has not been taught about these women and these girls, what has happened to them, and about healthcare and how it relates today with the experimentation and degradation of Black bodies and just not being fair and equitable. I said, I would open it up for doulas and midwives so that they can have a place to offer their resources to underserved communities. And not only that, but I'll create a space for first-year students, medical students who want to be doctors, so that they can actually stand in the space, so that they can learn dignity, respect, and humanity, and as they start to become these magnificent doctors in healthcare. And he was like, Ms. Browder, if you're gonna do all that with the building, he's like, I'll let you have it for $75,000. I was like, what's wrong with the building? He was like, nothing's wrong with the building, Ms. Browder, we just don't want it. I said, okay. I said, can I make an offer? He said, make your offer, Ms. Browder. I said, can I offer you $35,000 down and you carry the loan? Because, I dropped out of college, so I ain't got no student loan, I ain't got no debt. So no debt means, okay. So he said, tell you what, call me back on Monday. Let me go talk to my wife. So I called him back on Monday, and he said, Ms. Browder, tell my wife what you want to do with this building. So I started giving her my rap. I was like, ma'am, I'm here to be a root doctor. We want to get to the root of the issue of maternal health. And I just ran it down. Why are we losing our babies? What is wrong with doctors that we don't hear and listen and don't have the empathy and respect for our clients or the folks that they're seeing? So he says, I tell you what, Ms. Browder. Sorry about that. He says, I tell you what, Ms. Browder. She says, Miss Browder, the wife, Miss Browder, little Miss Gone with the Wind, I call her. I can't even remember her name. She was like, Miss Browder, we just love what you're doing. We've been watching you for a long time. And I was like, excuse me? She says, we've been watching you for a long time. And she says, can you just give us that $35,000 and you can have this building? I will leave you with, when you're being called to be a root doctor in our country right now today, because we need them to get to the root of the dis-ease in our country, things like this will happen. We purchased the building in February of last year, and we're going to be knocking the inside down to create the Mothers of Gynecology Health and Wellness Center for girls in the spot where they were tortured, raped, dehumanized, and held captive. And so with that, that is my talk. Thank you all so much. If you want more information, go to our website, and I appreciate the time.
Wow. Thank you so much, Michelle. This was awesome. Echoing Cynthia's chat, you are absolutely amazing. And opening the floor for questions. If you would like to take yourself off mute or type your question in the chat, happy to read that for you. Powerful. Thank you. Thank you. They'd like your website. We can send that in a follow-up email as well. But just to kick things off, I love what More Than Tours stands for, giving children context for history to help provide access to a seat at the table. One of the challenges in the biomedical research industry is creating better pathways or pipelines to increase diversity in medicine. What outcomes have you seen so far based on your educational tours? or what do you hope to see?
Well, I see more and more young people wanting to explore, the practice. I see them leaning more so, well, what else is there besides basketball? What else is there besides, the norm? Because mind you, now I deal with a lot of students that are urban that don't have the resources to go to the Ivy League schools to, participate in the conversation. And so introducing them to another profession, like we took them to the United States Supreme Court to watch Brian Stevenson argue Evan Miller versus Alabama, which challenges the constitutionality of sentencing children to die in prison. How much more effective would it be to, take them to places where we can actually start dealing with environmental injustices and start the conversation with them so that they can understand where these cell phones are coming and the effects that is happening on human bodies. So when you start to open them up, they want more. And that's exactly what they told me. And that is the name of our campus, the More Up campus. We created a space now where people can come to not only see the mothers of gynecology and to learn the truths of it, but also be taught more about how we can change the trajectory in our country around healthcare and environmental injustices. So I'm seeing a positive response.
Excellent. A question from the chat: when will the Health and Wellness Center open approximately?
We're hoping 2024, and keeping our fingers crossed, February of next year. The 2 years from the date that we bought it, we're hoping that that will be the date.
And do you speak at community events, medical schools, etc.? How can people reach?
We do. As a matter of fact, we want to go on tour. Hopefully in the summer. We created a backyard hospital, and it has a new painting. There's a new painting. So if you go to our website and or check out the People magazine, there is a new painting, a new narrative that we want to start, putting out into the atmosphere of, if the tables were flipped, you may feel a little pressure. If we change that narrative and help you to see it in a different way, if you go to our website, you'll see it. And so we're going to go on tour with our backyard hospital. It's in the back of a truck. It has an AR component where when you walk to the truck, the mothers actually start to tell you what happened to them. But they're in today's time. They look like 2023 girls. And so basically, we're gonna tour. We would like to go to medical colleges and have these conversations, bring our DJ with us, set the stage. Let's get into it. That's where we're going with it.
Okay. And will the space, the Health and Wellness Center, will it also be open to the public for people to walk in the spaces that the Rolfe sisters were in? That's another question from the chat.
So the Rolfe sisters, they're still living today. That was their experimentation or their sterilization happened in the 70s. And so that's not the space. That was Montgomery Community Action and actually did that to them. But the space where the hospital or the clinic, I want to integrate art and medicine. I want to bridge the two so that when someone comes in from prenatal care or when they're consulting their midwife, they're in a space that talks about the history of gynecology and healthcare and medicine in our country, and then ties it to where we are today. The granny wives that we don't talk about, right? The midwifery, the midwives that we don't typically talk about, but also the doctors. Some of these doctors, especially in the Black communities, how in the early, 1900s, you had to care for yourself because you couldn't just go to a white doctor. We have a place here now called the City of St. Jude that was a hospital, and it was for colored people. It was a colored hospital. And so to be able to sit in a space and learn about a City of St. Jude hospital that was created to care for women like Coretta Scott King, because she couldn't just go to St. Margaret's and have her baby because she was Black, so the space where they're getting this healing and birthing their babies or being prepared to give birth, they're also going to be educated. And so again, we're merging art and medicine with conversation with our community.
Let's talk a little bit about the relationship or potential relationship between art and translation. Translation being the process of turning observations in the lab, clinic, and community into interventions that improve the health of individuals and the public, from diagnostics and therapeutics to medical procedures and behavioral changes. what opportunities do you see for art and artists in the process of translation? And you answered this a bit as you were explaining all about the Health and Wellness Center and integrating art into medical education, but how could they support the process of translation, making sure that those observations do reach the community?
So when you say observations, I'm seeing it with different shows like Grey's Anatomy, right? So say, for instance, if you're watching these TV shows, the BMI count and things of that, they're actually starting to have these conversations on television or in theater. And so basically, I just think that there's many tools with your podcast. You're asking about how we can do this translation, correct? Create a pathway. One which is very, very inexpensive, but create a podcast. Start having these conversations. I love social media and Twitter and Snapchat and all of these new ways to communicate because people are actually listening. I think the young man that you had on before, Joe, I had no idea about this young man. The only thing I know is the numbers on Anarcha Lucy Betsy page started going up, and I'm like, what's going on here? It was this kid who did this magnificent TikTok about the mothers of gynecology. We shot from 4,000 to I think 5,000 views. I mean, that's how powerful the translation is. And unfortunately, you got to put a little kick in it. You have to have some kind of gimmick to go with it, but it's working. So I would just say continue to go on that path. I think more and more people are starting to have these conversations because of people like him and because of these outlets that helps with translating, this new translation of this new history. It's new to us because we've never heard it, but to see it, I think there was someone who the other day talked about Mary Kenner, Davison Kenner, who created the apparatus for the sanitary napkin. She also created the toilet paper roll. I didn't go to school for that. I learned that off of TikTok. I learned. So yeah, I'm all for a new translation.
Speaking of social media, how can we follow you on social media?
Anarcha Lucy Betsy Anarcha Lucy Betsy on Instagram, and then on Twitter, which we're boycotting. On Twitter, it is the Mothers of Gyno, and then they can follow us on Facebook.
All right. And will there be a virtual component offered for the conference?
Yes, there is. As a matter of fact, you would have to go to contact@anarchalucybetsy.org because we have since taken it down, but the demand, people so want to be a part of this. And so we're gonna put another page up, but they can go to contact and just let our team know that they want to join in, and they'll do it individually.
Okay. Perfect. Mm-hmm. Any questions from the audience?
Someone said they left Twitter.
Well, I have a question for you, Michelle. Do you have any questions or marching orders for our research community? How can we better partner with artists? And this kind of builds off of the translation question as well, to ensure that the efforts on both sides of things, to make sure that we're meeting community priorities, that we understand those priorities. How can we work together with the various communities to really affect change and advance health equity?
I would then counter and ask, what is the root of your work? What is it? What can you explain a little bit about the root of your work? And then I'm going to put that answer in there.
So the Clinical and Translational Science Collaborative, we are the hub for our local hospital affiliates, and then we're a part of the national CTSA program. But we are trying to be that catalyst, trying to help people think about diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in their research programs. Think about it at the beginning, not when you are applying for a grant, so that you don't have to pivot. It's ingrained in the fabric of your work. And with that, there is a call for community engagement and outreach in a very authentic way that historically we might not have seen. Mm-hmm. So I see, and just to share a little tidbit, I play the flute. So I am an artist as well in my own right, but I see that there's just a lot of connectivity and opportunities for, like you said, sharing this information that has historically not been shared in ways that it can be digested, but then more importantly, applied in ways that affects change. Talking is great, awareness is great, but then what do we do next? So helping with those next steps and making sure that along the pipeline, like you said, you're working with students and people who have been marginalized. How do we make sure from that point all the way up to people who are already in the industries and spaces that, social determinants of health, working to improve those situations and circumstances, what's the most effective way to collaborate?
Very good question. Very good question. Again, I would just, it's all about creating a pathway. So however, or whatever you feel or see that you can create, like, and I'll just take Nicole Hannah-Jones, for example, how she's created this pathway. It started off with a magazine. Then it grew to a podcast. Then it grew to a docuseries. Things that we take for granted, just something small in terms of a TikTok, like with Joe, has grown to be something educational and transformative in that people are saying, I need to go and read about Rebecca Crumler, who was the nurse who actually wrote a book to talk about I'm not talking to white folk no more. I'm gonna talk to Black people and tell you how to stay alive, right? So that's been my mantra. And then, don't be afraid to jump out and do it. I had so many people to tell me. I've had the Montgomery Museum of Fine Arts to say, your project is going to cost too much. We can't stand behind it. Yeah, but look at the women, look at what happened to these girls, and it's still happening in our healthcare system. So to me, it's worth it. So I wouldn't allow anyone to tell me or to derail or disrupt the plan. But you first need your plan. So whatever you're gifted in doing, whether it's writing, creating blogs, or having conversations or podcasts, or playing the flute. Oh, Lizzo. You know what I'm saying? Playing the flute, writing music. It's all an amateur. I think of Zora Neale Hurston, how she was a prolific writer, but nobody wanted to hire her because she was Black. But yet here we have the Clotilda and the slave narratives because of her. I just think that even if you have to take your gift or your talent and turn it into a pathway to help cure this disease, you know what I'm saying? That's the way I've done it. There's no magic trick.
We have
others. Oh, okay.
Hi. Hi guys. My name's Tiara McLoy. I'm a community healthcare worker for University Hospitals here in Cleveland, Ohio. We started a program 3 years ago. The hospital never had it. I was a aide on the floors. The hospital never had a program that helped like people in the community, because we noticed, especially by me coming from the PACU unit of the hospital, a lot of African-American patients would come in there and they didn't even know, what they were in there for surgery. They were like, well, I don't know, and how this and that. And in my mind, how you coming to get a surgery, you should know what's going on.
Yeah.
So I had mentioned it to one of my coworkers, and her mom was there. I didn't know she was our mom, but she was one of our recruiters for UH. And I was telling her, like, we need some type of program, that assists the people, because the social determinations of health is real, y'all. We got people out here don't know what's going on. It's just not African-American, it's all cultures. People don't know what, Medicaid wise, they don't understand none of this stuff. And when I talked to this lady, she emailed my boss. I tell this story all the time. And she had told her, like, I need this lady. And I was like, am I in trouble? Am I in trouble? She was like, no. She said the hospital is coming up with this program for community healthcare workers. She said we never had them. She was explaining, like, Cleveland Clinic had them, Metro Hospital had them. I was the first cohort of this program, you guys. And I promise you, we on our third cohort right now today. And I promise you, I'm the only one that they got. I'm African-American, and I'm also the only female, and I'm the only African-American Black one that they have in home care of the hospital. So our patients look forward to meeting us and seeing somebody who they can relate to. So I understand it. I promise you, I'm the one who said it was powerful, because I respect what you're doing. I'm literally going to take this back to our team and just, explain it to them. Like, this is amazing what you do.
Thank you. Thank you.
No problem.
No, thank you for what you're doing.
Oh, I try. I promise y'all. And you know what? I had just did they put us on the website. So if anybody from UH on here, they can go see it. My boss was on there and she was saying how, the people at home care really respect what I do because we got social workers there because I'm not a social worker. I'm an extension of social work. Because I'm with you, I don't have a degree. I have a associate's degree in medical assistant, but it's not a degree in what I do now. So, and she was explaining to us, like, she was like, Tierra, you do well. And then, like I say, who he's serving in these communities that we come from, because I grew up a lot of these people that I don't know some of them, and then I do know some of them, but a lot of these communities, we grew up, and, in these places that we know, how to help people. Yes. So I'm at all with what you're doing. I think it's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll throw it right back at you too, because that's a pathway. That's one thing that people always say that absolutely, and that you have to have a degree to create change.
No, I don't have, not in that.
No, you don't.
I don't have it. It's a certification now. It's a certification, but a certification is not a degree. And I really I like what I do at UH. When I come home sometimes with such a sense of pride, especially if I felt like I can help somebody, get to their next step, or, they like, Tierra, you got me food, and, my kids were this. I'm okay with that. I get a great sense of what I do. Like, I love what I do.
Mm-hmm. That's what matters. Thank you.
No problem.
That we have 3 final questions from the chat. Any possibility of removing the monument of Marion Sims?
Now, see, who said that? That's the goal. So at our conference, we have none other than Dr. Alethea Maybank from the American Medical Association that will be speaking. And so once the clinic is at the point where we are starting to redo the inside or restore the inside, I would like to have his monument moved from the state's capital and put in context, because where he did his experimentation is there at 33 Perry Street. I would like to have the monument inside the clinic, simply because that's where he belongs, right? So, and because I live in a I call it a slave state, but a red state, I think that it would go over better. So that is one of the charges that we're going to put with the MASA. It's called the Medical Association for the State of Alabama. We're going to ask them to give him to us because they also support us. They came and donated money when we were first erecting the monument. They love the vision of it. And so now the next step is to ask them to take him down and to allow us to have them in this space. So yes, there is going to be a move. You'll hear about it nationally.
Perfect. Any books that you recommend people reading?
Oh, let's see. If you haven't read Medical Bondage by Deidre Cooper Owens, that's one. If you haven't read Harriet Washington, what is it? Medical Apartheid, that's another. If you haven't read Under My Skin with Villarosa, what's her name? Linda Villarosa, Under the Skin. She's a New York Times journalist, best author. Please make sure you read that. And then also, there's one coming out in June. It's called Say Anarcha. J.C. Hallman is a just prolific writer, but he actually found Anarcha where she's buried. He found the rest of her life and basically recreated it in this book, and it's coming out in June of 2023. So if you all would like to grab a hold of that. And then Ibrahim Kendi, who wrote Stamped from the Beginning, it kind of gives you the ideology of race, where it all stems from. And it's, of course, hinged upon Jefferson Davis and his speech in Montgomery, Alabama during his run to, separate the unions for the Civil War. So I would strongly encourage those books.
Excellent. Thank you. And our final question, did you create your blouse? And is the basis for purchase?
Livy. I think it's called Livy. Livy. What did she say? Thank you so much. It's great. Oh, thank you. But yeah, it's online. It's called Livy and Live, Liv. But no, I didn't create it, but I did create this one. And if you would like to have it, it's on our website. But yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. This has been absolutely wonderful, informative, thought-provoking, action-provoking. So I trust that everyone on this call took away a lot. And if you have one final takeaway for us.
The time is now for us to just do it. Just whatever it is that you feel that you need to do. We each have a calling, and so just do it. Yep.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
So who's next? We have Dr. Linda Bradley. Dr. Bradley is a professor of obstetrics, gynecology, and reproductive biology and director of the Center of Menstrual Disorders and Hysteroscopic Services at the Cleveland Clinic. Dr. Bradley performed one of the first hysteroscopic sterilization procedures in the United States in 2000. We'll hear from Dr. Bradley on Thursday, February 23rd from 12 to 1 p.m. And the best part is that since you're here, you're already registered for the series, so we hope to see you there. What can you do today? You can schedule a ready consultation at spark.case.edu. You can sign up to attend future programming and join our listserv, and even visit our website and review CTSC DEIA resources. And in the spirit of wellness and art and just taking care of yourself, I read a fascinating article about Zoom fatigue this weekend. It was on Medium, and it's by Dr. Jennifer King. She's co-director of the Center on Trauma and Adversity and assistant professor of the Mandel School of Applied Social Sciences at Case Western Reserve University. She's also the facilitator of our engaged break during our unmeeting on March 16th. And she coined this term virtual commute time. And please accept our first commitment to giving almost 10 minutes back to you to engage in meaningful activity. So move, breathe, engage your senses. And we thank you for joining us. Have a great day, everyone.